Resume recording. Go to share screen. All right, and we need to get to course modules. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the modules, and there are well, let's go to assignments first, so we're all clear. Under assignments, well, we'll get to it. There we go. I should have closed more windows. Under assignments, right around there it is. Right after Zoom attendance week 3, right after all the design sketch, the first draft of the analysis paper, and the description of the first it's the same as the description of the paper in general, right? And so you're supposed to write an analysis comparing these two works of art. Okay, they're both descents from the cross, but from very different time periods, very different artists, and they're quite different from each other. And it needs to be minimum of 600 words, probably no more than 1,000 if you're the kind of person who writes a lot. And now let's go to modules, because under modules you see this exact same thing, but we also have some other things for us to look at. There we go. And it is after Unit 4, there's analysis paper number 1. And so this first document is exactly what we just looked at. It's just the Word document version, right? And here you go. You have all the same information. And then you have the 2 images. And probably the thing that most people get wrong about the paper is in the paper, this is supposed to be overwhelmingly a formal analysis, which means that you should be talking about design concepts, design issues, and not talking about literary differences or literal differences, right? So like meaning differences in terms of like the literal things that we can see in the painting. So like to give you an example, right? Like if you were to make a comparison to say, in the Beckman painting at the bottom of the ladder, there are some stones, but in the Rubens painting at the bottom of the ladder, there is a bowl with some sponges. Okay. That's pretty much irrelevant to the task at hand, which is to compare them in terms of formal elements. And there's not really, unless you could tie that in some way to some bigger formal issue that you were making, which I don't think you could, it's kind of irrelevant. Or another irrelevant issue would be sometimes people like to count the number of people that are helping Christ down, right? So like there are 4 people who are there assisting the descent of Christ in the Beckman painting, and then there are 8 in the Rubens painting. And once again, that's pretty much a meaningless difference and doesn't, really make any difference in terms of the formal analysis. I mean, it makes a slight difference in that because there are 8 people, we have a lot more spots of light, right? Of light shapes going around, because no matter what they're wearing, at least their heads are generally well illuminated and the skin on their heads is a relatively light spot. But that's not much of a comparison because we can't even compare that to the Beckman because the Beckman doesn't even organize value that way anyway. And yeah, so it would be hard to make that a meaningful comparison in terms of formal issues, right? So what we want to do is look at them as paintings, as visual things, and not as works of literature, right? We don't want to look at them in terms of storytelling and what they're depicting. Instead, we want to look at them in terms of how they're depicting them, in terms of the use of visual elements, the use of design principles, and design concepts. Okay, does that so far make sense? Everybody? Let's see. Anyone? We got two new messages. Yes, yes. Okay, cool. All right. So, let me know if like reading through this, at any point tonight or later, if you're reading through it and you're like, wait, something doesn't quite make sense. You can send me a question on email and I would respond to it. So, that's the first thing that's available in the modules, but let's look at the modules some more because there are some more items in there that will be helpful to you. The next major thing, we're going to skip the concept of design for a second, is the images. We have a PDF, and as opposed to the images that are available on the Word document or the images that are available on the assignment description, right? Here we can see the images much larger in a PDF, right, side by side to compare them. But then on top of that, we can also zoom in even more and really look at each one in terms of all of the details. And you can get a much clearer sense of like what colors were used and in what ways and in what proportions when you can see them like this up close. Okay? So that's the second thing that's in modules that I think you'll find pretty helpful. The third thing in modules that you might want to look at is a document called the Concept of Design. And the first part is just kind of giving you an overview about design and its relationship to composition in Western European painting. And part two kind of goes into that a little bit more. And then part three is where we really start. And that has the visual elements, part three. So line, shape, value, color. You can see there's a lot about color, texture, space, and form. Okay. And then the design principles, once again, all the same things goes, and some of them get very detailed. And then there's also a bunch of other design concepts, right? That like figure ground and scale of proportion. Many of these we've talked about. Some of these we will be talking about. Some of them we probably won't be talking about much at all. But they're all somewhat important and might be useful for you on this paper. Now, this is an 11-page document, so and it's pretty dense because it's like everything about every design element, design principle, and other design concepts I could think of to get all down into one document. But if no other way, if you were to use it where, let's say you were looking at the two images and you thought to yourself, maybe I should compare these in terms of value. They seem pretty different to me in terms of value. Then you could look up the section on value and just read that and make sure that you're understanding how to think about value like an artist would. Okay. All right. So there is that document. And then lastly, under modules, the last document that you might find helpful to you is a document I made. And I will say this, after everyone turns in their first drafts, I will do the same thing for you guys, which is I will go through all the comments that I wrote for you individually. And if there's anything that I think is useful for everyone in general, like let's say you wrote something about rhythm and repetition, and I wrote back about how I think if you're going to talk about rhythm and repetition, you need to talk about the kind of the sinuous, fluid kind of almost languorous kind of rhythm and repetition in Rubens painting, right? Then I would share that not just with you, but then I would also put it in a Word document that I share with everybody. I'd make sure that your name was removed so people didn't know that was a topic that you were talking about. But my main point is just that if I'm providing some information that might be helpful to you to hone your argument, to get you to think about what you're seeing a little bit more clearly. Then I'm going to provide it to everybody so that everyone could benefit. Okay, anyway. So what we have here is from a while ago, my reactions to everyone's first draft. And I kind of break it down in terms of some of the obvious mistakes that people make every time, right? And one of them is like, a lot of people get wrong how to use underlines or italics. And basically, when you're talking about the title of a painting, you should always use underlines or italics. You should not use quotes, right? Because you only use quotes for creations that are a part of a larger thing. So, like articles get put into quotes, but the title of the magazine or the title of a book do not get put into quotes. They are either underlined or in italics. Also, I give you some corrections on how to spell the names because people seem to mess that up, how to write the possessive forms of their names and stuff like that. And but I also give you some other kind of advice about writing and about which kind of words to use and stuff like that. Okay. So far, does all of that make sense? Do you have any questions about any of that? No questions. Everyone else, no questions? Okay, so we'll move on. So besides that, there are still more resources that are available to you. And hold on a second, let's go to the YouTube page, which is the right one. I guess we'll go to that one and go to here. So if you go to the YouTube page and then you look up playlists, you'll find two playlists right at the beginning, one called Zoom meetings and one called reviews for tests and papers. I'm going to open up the Zoom meetings one first. And in the Zoom meetings one, there are 3 lectures kind of early on called Components of Design, Components of Design Part 1, Components of Design 2, and Components of Design Part 3. And I'm looking to see if there's anything else. Do I repeat that anywhere? No. Okay. And so in those, right, I would strongly recommend that you definitely watch the first one, part 1, because in that I go through all of the design elements or visual elements, all of the design principles. I don't go through every other kind of design concept, but I go through the um, the art elements and the design principles and kind of talk about them each just for a little bit, just so you have kind of a sense of what each one means, right? And we'll give you more of an overview that will help you in terms of figuring out what you're going to what topics you're going to write about when comparing those two paintings. But then another place that you could go to would be reviews of tests and papers. Whoops.
Back.
That was not what I meant to
First
do.
video I've recorded it in a while, and this is
Pause that. What am I getting on about there? Where's the X? There it is. Okay, so in this playlist, there are review sessions for all of the quizzes and all the tests from previous years, as well as at the end, I'm putting the review sessions that I do. So like the review session for paper number 1, which I did it at noon today, which is very much similar to this. There might be a little bit of some things that are different. Anyway, I put that up already, so it's on the playlist, but also the review session for quiz number 2 and the review session for quiz number 1. But if you also look at where is it? Essay questions, review for comparison paper. Yeah, I think it's here, this one and that one from fall of 18. And then there's also, yeah, I guess it's all of those from fall of 18. They're in different parts. Which one is part one? It's a little bit hard for me to tell. That's part one. That's part three. That's part four. Still not sure where part two is. Probably, nope. And in those, I go through, let's pull this one up for a second. I go through a good deal of depth on this. I have the volume down kind of low. As you can see, just in terms of like, as I'm scrolling, how much time I'm spending just talking about these two paintings. So I go through a number of different possible options of things that you could consider for comparisons and what would be more successful or less successful. And so I would recommend watching those, and that would give you some more information. Okay, so go back and go back.
Welcome back.
Not
This is
that
the
one.
first video I've recorded in a while.
Okay, and then let's go back one more to home. So another place where you might find some videos that would be useful, because if you think about all the videos that we've been watching up to this point, right? Every unit, we've had some design concepts. So scale might be a pretty relevant and useful issue to consider. And I discussed scale in Unit 4. Trying to think, shape potentially could be one that you cover, but one that's definitely going to be pretty important. Oh, and line in Unit 1, discussing line could be very useful. But in Unit 6, which we haven't gotten to yet, but in Unit 6, we have a playlist on value. And if you watch just the first two lectures on value, I think you would find that to be very useful in terms of helping you with the paper. Also, the next lectures here on that very same unit on composition and page structure, I think you would also find pretty useful. And then in Unit 7, the no, the Unit 8, I guess, yeah. Unit 8, visual pathways. The visual pathways lecture, I think you would find very, also very useful in terms of helping you think about how to analyze the paintings. Okay, so there's that. Now, that leads us to one final thing that we have available to us as a source, and that is, if I can find it, of PowerPoint right here. So let's go from the beginning. So I have this PowerPoint, which I'm going to send to everyone as both as a PowerPoint and as a PDF, just because PDFs are a little bit easier for some people to open. And in it, I just show you a number of different ways to look at the comparison between, thank you, Diesel. That was my dog, if you heard that. He runs like a horse through the house. How to look at the differences between these two works. So, and I give you kind of a breakdown of all the ways that I'm showing you the works. And you'll see what I mean as we get to it. So one of the ways is I show you just purely black and white versions of them to help you kind of see what's going on in terms of value contrast in both of the images. I also show you them kind of blurred, as well as even more blurred, but also upside down blurred, now even more blurred. And the purpose of this is it's a lot easier to see how like all of this is one kind of light shape, right? Going from Mary up through Jesus, through the cloth, all the way up to the figure up there, right? that makes all one kind of fluid light shape. It would be a lot harder to see that if you were just looking at it like in pure sharpness, because all you would see is you'd see the individual objects and you wouldn't notice how all those light shapes kind of group together. I also do some posterization to maybe help you just see kind of like some of the organization of color and value. I show you all the main movements and down to even the minor movements, just to help you kind of get a sense of what the flow is in each of the paintings. I show you the geometry of each painting to help you kind of figure out how they're being composed. I break them down into tiles. I think this is a really good way for you to see like the overall color decisions and value decisions. It's a lot easier to see that that Beckman is using mostly light values, right? And that Rubens is using mostly dark values. You can also get a sense of how much the the red and the red browns, besides the grays and the purplish grays, really dominate the colors in this painting. And all the other colors, like the blues and the greens, are really just small little spots. And you also get in the Beckman the sense of how much that kind of like that gray, that kind of pale, coolish gray, and then that kind of like slightly cool, kind of yellow ochery, creamish sort of color. How much those two colors are like the dominant color in the painting and are almost in every one of these little squares. And then we also look at them up close, just like on the PDF that's available on the module. And then I also have a set of other kind of comparisons to kind of help you practice thinking about how to see the differences between paintings. And if you watch those videos, I actually go through, I think, every single one of these comparisons and just talk about what the differences are between these paintings, why I chose them, how they're similar in certain ways, how they're different in certain ways. All right, and that's it. So I will share that with everyone, but that is essentially all of the resources that we have. Um, we can maybe go back to the beginning. So do you guys have any questions? Do you want me to talk any more about the paintings? It looks like all the answers are in the chat. No questions. That helped a lot. Okay, that's good. That's good. So one of the things I would say is I would strongly recommend, okay, I will say this, right? I strongly recommend starting from the point of view of value. Value is key, right? Meaning that it will answer a lot of other questions. If you think about what the differences are between the paintings in terms of value, that will help you in a lot of ways. And I would say that because Rubens' painting is a Baroque painting, and because Baroque painting in general is about contrast, it's specifically about value contrast and about the way light illuminates in dark spaces. So, and the drama of that. So in the Rubens painting, right, value and value organization and the light shining in the dark space is the primary way that he creates unity. It's the primary way that he creates contrast, like the distinctions between things. And it's the primary way that he creates emphasis, like telling us what's important, right? And then, whereas in the Beckman, value is very different, right? It's used in certain ways, but it's not used at all in a similar way. It's very different. And because it's used in a very different way, it can't solve those problems in the same way that it does in the Rubens painting. And so he has to rely on other things to create emphasis, other things to create contrast. and other things to create unity. Okay. And so if you then think of that and like then and so another way you could look at it is things like, well, what is the most important thing in this painting? And what's the most important thing in this painting? And then what decisions did the artist make to make sure that I understood that those were the important things? Okay. So do you have any questions about that? Looks like someone is writing something in the chat. No, Ashley says no. Leanne, any questions? No, no, says Jasmine. Okay. Well, and remember, like I will be sending out that document, or like those images. Remember that there are those documents available under the module, and I will be posting this video and then sending probably sometime tomorrow morning. I'll send it out to everyone, but I mean it will be available on YouTube tonight. So if you wanted to watch it over again or anything, and is there anything else I wanted to say about that? And then tomorrow morning, I will be recording the first video for Unit 6. And the very first one I'm going to do is I'm going to do value, since, like I said, value is really the most important topic to understand in terms of comparing these two paintings. So I'll do that tomorrow. And but you could watch the lecture that's already on YouTube on value already if you wanted to. Okay. Um, all right. Well, if there are no other questions, we're gonna end the stop the share and end the stream, so to speak. No final questions? No questions about anything else besides the paper or any other topic? I'm gonna look at the chat one more time just to see. Nope, just to thank you. All right. Well, then we end it tonight. Everyone have a good night. Bye.